It's easier. I've noticed if it's like an older sister with a young girl, or an older brother with a young boy, it is a little trickier when it's opposite gender. But I have seen that. I do think that it is helpful, but it's even more difficult when there is no conversation. Right. You're just kind of observing things. You're just like, man, my sister looks sad all the time. She's staring off at the door all the time. And then, like what you were saying earlier, when's daddy coming back? Because he told me he was going to come for my birthday.
When dad left, it impacted him in a very different way.
Sure.
Because he was like late teen. He was 16. And so for him, it was like, all right, I need to man up now and look after my family. You know, like I need to be the one that, you know, my sister and my mum can turn to.
Right.
Which I can't even imagine what it's like as a 16-year-old to feel that burden almost.
Like it's a pretty heightened level of responsibility, right?
Most definitely. And so I think our relationship changed for a while because I wanted to do stuff that he would never have just let slide. Like, so I feel like I lived a very secretive life for a few years.
Yeah.
And he was like very much in the dark, and I was I became very distant from my family in general. But he saved my ass in so many occasions. So I think like when I got to an age where I was able to really reflect on life, and I was at a space where I was actively healing, like just all this trauma that I had dealt with.
Yeah.
Like dad leaving being one of them. I was able to really rekindle our friendship firstly, and then secondly like our like brother sisterhood.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. I love him so much. Like I said, like he really is my best friend.
No, that's beautiful. And part of the reason, thank you for sharing that. Part of the reason why I asked that is because I always think about the impact of when somebody is growing up without one of their primary parents, that we know there's going to be some level of deficit. So if I'm you potentially and my father's not there, but I do have this brother who is a bit older than me, doesn't mean he is my father, but clearly based on what you said, sounds like he wanted to step up to the plate and create some level of accountability to you, maybe trying to demonstrate a good role model or trying to be some type of male example. I think that that's awesome when you have that, right? Because I've seen what happens when you don't, and then you go look for it elsewhere. You start looking for it outside of the home.
Definitely.
Because you can't get it, right? It's kind of like, to give a quick example, for those that may not know, in certain situations, like why young men may pursue being involved in like gangs. Not always, but in many cases it's because they are coming from fatherless homes where they're searching for that like paternal love and affection and energy, and there's nobody around to give it to them. And then you have somebody who's like, you know, here, I'll give you that love. Just stand on the corner and do this for me. And they'll do it because they really want to fulfill that hole that they're experiencing, but they don't really know how to do it, right? But when you have somebody there, right? So if you had that same example, but it's like, hey, but my older brother is here. He's like, hey man, come over here. We don't need that. Come here. Whatever happens between this day forward, like, you know, I'm going to have your back. I understand, you know, dad's not here, but I'm here and I can give you some of that, right? That to me is so powerful. So if we can identify people in our life that might want to assist with that, or just allow them maybe to be that for us, we can be at least a little bit more well-adjusted than if we didn't have that and we have the deficit of that person not being there, if that makes sense.
It's interesting what you're saying. I hadn't really like considered it like that.
Yeah.
What came to mind for me was like, this is so unfair on a 16-year-old to like take this burden on. Like,
yeah,
he could just be a 16-year-old.
True.
You know? And for
very
me,
true.
it's like his mistakes were like 10 times worse because he felt like he was responsible.
Right.
You know? So it's like,
right.
He can't even be a teenager. Like, he can't even experience like basically messing up in life like we all do, because he just has like this extra burden of like, I need to show up all the time.
Oh yeah.
Which I think like it has its pros and its cons, but it's such a catch-22.
No, absolutely. And one of the reasons why part of the reason why I said to you what I said to you about your older brother. So I have an older sister, and she's 4.5 years older than me. And because I grew up without my mother because she passed away when I was really young, my sister tried to do that for me. And I always have a lot of love and respect for her because, I mean, the gap was like half of as big as you and your brother. But, you know, she tried the best that she could. And I always have a lot of respect because that's exactly what you were just describing. You take on this level of accountability that is really not your duty, right? But you just feel like, you know, I'm maybe the closest thing you're going to have right now. So let me do what I can, you know? So it's easier for me to like relate to your brother in that way to say like, man, commend him for trying to do that for you. Cause that's how I feel like what my sister tried to do for me. So shout out to the older siblings out there who step in and try to do that, even though it's not fair. But the point is, if we can identify people in our lives that may assist us in those ways, I think it's awesome if we allow ourselves to let them in. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, you older siblings, you guys are built different. Really, like I take my hats off because I don't know if I was ever built to be an older sibling.
No, it's and it's strange too, like because you know sometimes I've learned from some families that I've worked with over the years, like some people, like let's say like in same scenario, like your dad walks away or is gone for some reason, one reason or another. Sometimes mom will sit the older sibling down. Listen, son. Listen, sweetheart. For the daughter, I need you to step up. Like, I need you to, like, I'm telling you, I need this from you. And it may not be fair, but just given the circumstances, I could really use your assistance with your younger sibling. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes just like, I'm just kind of noticing that nobody's talking to you about these things, or that you seem like you're very isolated. So something just calls to me to try to be there for you. So that's why I thought maybe that's happening for you, but I don't know if that's to be true or not. So,
like, was there a conversation had?
Sometimes I've seen scenarios where sometimes I've actually been able to be a part of it and say, you know, like let's say in the same scenario, let's say there's like a slightly smaller age gap. Maybe it's like 3 or 4 years. I've seen it where they will talk to the older sibling and say, hey, listen, I know that you have a lot going on. I know you're trying to also process whatever we're dealing with as a family. It would be great if you felt so impassioned to take a little extra responsibility and try to look out for your younger brother, younger sister. It's easier, I've noticed, if it's like an older sister with a young girl, or an older brother with a young boy. It is a little trickier when it's opposite gender. But I have seen that. I do think that it is helpful, but it's even more difficult when there is no conversation. Right? You're just kind of observing things. You're just like, man, my sister looks sad all the time. She's staring off at the door all the time. And then, like when you were saying earlier, when's daddy coming back? Because he told me he was going to come for my birthday. I have to imagine, obviously I don't know, I'm not the older sibling, but I have to imagine like they're observing some part of that experience. And maybe they're thinking like, okay, so what could I do? Like, how could I try to be of some assistance, or how could I try to even help in the situation? So it's very difficult to navigate. Like anytime you are missing a parent, these are just some of the complexities we're outlining right now, but there's so many more.
Right.
So